Hello and welcome to the Autism, ADHD and Us 3 podcast with me, Jenny Lucas. We'll be talking all things neurodiversity, including late diagnosis, parenting and everything else that comes in between. This podcast is not intended to be diagnostic. I am not a doctor. These are our personal experiences peppered with research and occasionally the experiences of others. The podcast is intended as a supportive guide through the experience of parenting neurodiverse children as a late diagnosed person, hopefully bringing some relatable stories and laughs along the way. Any relevant links will be in the show notes. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to Autism, ADHD and Us 3. This is actually going to be the last episode of season 2. I'm taking a little break over the summer and I aim to be back with you in September with some more relatable content, but I need some time to think about what that content's going to be and take a little bit of a break. If you are not already following me on social media and you want to stay in touch and still get some information over the summer, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram and Facebook at Audistically Me. You can find me over there so you can keep getting some content whilst we are having our little summer holiday. But this episode, it's a bit of a deep one. I don't know if I say that about every episode, but this one in particular, where we're talking about unmasking the lies that we have been told and that we've told ourselves about being neurodivergent, or before we knew that we were neurodivergent. So it's understanding that actually we were never broken. We were just unseen in our reality and the way that we were presenting. Also, if you're used to watching this podcast as a video, this is an audio only episode this week, or this month rather. That's just how it has worked out to be. So I'm sorry that you're not getting to see my beautiful face in the podcast. But video podcast will be back when we come back with season 3. So we're going to unpack life after a late diagnosis of autism or ADHD or both, what that can look like in terms of unpacking some of the things that we thought we knew about ourselves that actually turned out to be a bit of a lie. So it's going to be a bit raw. There's going to be all sorts of personal information from me about what that has looked like for me, and hopefully there'll be some stuff in here that you can relate to and identify with. And if anything comes up for you that you want to share or you want to discuss with me further, the links in the show notes have got all my contact details. It's really lovely when you do reach out and just send me a little message to say that something's resonated. So if something does resonate and you'd like to share that with me, then please do get in touch. And I should also mention at this point as well that the book that I'm writing is coming ever closer to being released. By the time I come back to you in September, we will be just over a month away from the release date in October of 2025. I can't believe I'm actually saying that out loud. If you're not already signed up to my book waitlist and you'd like to know more about the book release and what's happening behind the scenes, there is a link on the website where you can sign up for the waitlist for the book, so you'll be the first to know when it comes out. But I'm pretty excited about that, but I'm also a little bit in shock that it's coming together. But it is coming together and it's going to be brilliant. It's something that I really want you all to have a read of because I think it'll be really, really useful. Anyway, enough of the plugs. Getting on to talking today about the internalized lies that so many of us carry before diagnosis, and actually the painful, confusing identity collapse that can often come after, sometimes not immediately after diagnosis, but in the months following diagnosis, when things all start to sort of fall into place and you have all those almost like daily light bulb moments. This can be pretty tricky to deal with, and there's a grief that comes with that, which we've talked about before. But the truth about all those things can actually finally start to set you free. So the lies that we've absorbed without knowing, and I want to just go into a little bit more detail on this. There's like a billion, and they will be very personal to each of you as individuals, but there's a few sort of specific ones I want to talk about here, which hopefully you'll resonate with, which I have resonated with. That is, number one is, I'm just lazy. That is something that I hear all the time. It's something that I wish I could bin off as a bit of terminology about being lazy. I'm just lazy. And that is the fact that when we struggle to do things, when we know that things need to be done, because there's always things that need to be done in life, and particularly if you're a parent, there's always things that need to be done. And it's not always easy to access the executive function required to do those things. But what's actually happening with this lie here, the I am lazy lie, is that we've got some executive dysfunction going on. We've potentially got some autistic inertia going on. We've got task paralysis, sensory avoidance, and burnout. And you can have
all of those things at the same time, which can be really overwhelming. But that lie has stuck with you because you were praised potentially when you overfunctioned and you pushed through all the sort of things that were screaming at you internally that were saying, stop, we don't have capacity for this, don't do it. And then you were shamed when you needed rest. How many of you had a parent whom at a weekend would bash on your bedroom door with a hoover at like 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning because you were having a lie in? Or, you know, if you're sitting down and they're like buzzing around you and huffing because they're doing stuff and you were just sitting there, that is an internalized shame that comes with that kind of, it's not okay to sit down and rest when other people are doing things. Like, you've constantly got to be on the go in order to be accepted or to fit in. That's a really tricky one to get over, actually. And I realized myself that I was that person. I had grown into be that person, and that when I needed help with something, or when I realized actually that I was feeling overcapacity, or I was frustrated at the way that other people in the house had done things or not done things, I became that huffy person. I'd get stressy and huffy, and I would expect, this was kind of subconscious until I picked into it, I would expect the people around about me to pick up on that frustration and react to it in a kind of almost like saviour sort of way. It's like, oh, mum's really stressed and huffy, we'd better go and get up and help her with stuff. Or, you know, my husband, oh, I'd better come in and see what's wrong. And actually, that is a really poor form of communication. It's not communication at all. And it just creates emotional damage, for want of a better phrase, to the people around about you, because you're not communicating clearly what needs to go on. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy necessarily to communicate clearly about those things. It's difficult when you're managing other neurodivergence in the household. And I've lost count of the number of conversations that I've had with my husband around how we are different domestically around the house, in the way that we do things, the things that we see, the standards that we keep. And that has led to lots of very difficult conversations where he has felt targeted, if you like, to use one of the Z terms. I'm feeling so targeted right now. And that was a difficult conversation to have over and over and over again, because it was almost like we were speaking two different languages and he wasn't hearing the words that I was saying in the way that I needed him to, blah, blah, blah. We worked through that in terms of bettering our communication, but that is not an easy thing to do. It does perseverance and persistence in order for things to become easier to communicate. And it is a lot easier now. I'm not saying it's perfect, it never will be. Nothing is perfect. But I noticed in myself that what I was doing was creating this emotional damage to the people around about me and expecting them to be mind readers and know stuff. And that was actually just poor communication on my part. But it had come from this internalized sort of lie of being lazy, that I had picked up in my own life. And then I was pushing that out subconsciously onto the other people around about me. And that took a bit of significant reparenting on my half. And actually, I mean, there's lots of things that have taken, I mean, that could be like 10 different podcast episodes, I think. I'm talking about reparenting ourselves, particularly if you're a millennial. We are doing the work, people. We are out here doing the work. So it can be difficult when you didn't know that your brain was wired for different rhythms. And I always used to find it fascinating how, like, my energy can come in sporadic bursts. So I might have a couple of days where I am like superwoman and I'm like, right, this house is a shithole. We're getting out here. We're sorting it all out. And I will do like 5 rooms in the house. And then I'll push myself to the point of exhaustion, and then I'll be sore and tired and grumpy for a few days afterwards because I had that peak of energy that obviously I was not able to sustain. And I used to find that really frustrating because there was no consistency there. But I've since realised that is just how my brain wires. And when the flow is there, my God, we've got to ride that unicorn. So the second lie that I want to talk about is being too sensitive or overreacting, quote unquote, to things. What's actually happening here generally is sensory overwhelm. Could be a bit of rejection sensitivity. There could be some alexithymia going on there. There could be some trauma responses going on there. And there could be a combination of any of those things. Alexithymia, if you're not already aware of the term, is where you struggle to recognize the sort of emotional senses that are happening in your body. So the feelings that you are experiencing emotionally. And what blew my mind this year was that emotions or feelings are actually felt sensations in the body. I had no idea that that's what people meant when they were talking about feelings, having feelings. So hopefully that is not also just blowing your mind too, because there's a lot to think about when you consider that as a thing. But this lie has stuck with you particularly because you were gaslit, you were dismissed, or you were taught to distrust your own feelings, because you were probably also subconsciously learning that you were responsible for the emotional well-being of the adults around you, and that they couldn't handle your overwhelm and your sensitivity and your distress because they themselves had never learned how to handle their own emotional overwhelm. And again, as a parent, I'm super guilty of this, and certainly was super guilty of it probably 5+ years ago, probably slightly longer than that actually. Before I got my ADHD diagnosis, I one of the first things that eventually led me to finding that out was questioning myself and my parenting, why I was getting so overwhelmed and shouting at the kids so much, especially when they were so little. Like, why was I finding that really stressful? And the question why you'll have heard me talking about before, and actually the why method is something that I have created and developed and has gone into my book and my coaching, is that question is really, really important. Why? Why am I feeling this? Why am I reacting like this? Why am I experiencing this in this way? And when you can sit with that and dig into it, my God, you can learn some incredible things about yourself. Not all of them very nice. And this was one of those things that wasn't very nice for me to learn, that, to recognise and acknowledge that actually I was not a very nice mummy a lot of the time, and to understand, excuse me, the challenges that was presenting for my children, and actually the emotional damage that was presenting for them as well, and that I was causing them because of the way that I was reacting to the world. And I didn't realise that that's because I was dealing with my own sensory overwhelm, that I was pushing myself over my limits, and I was holding myself to other people's standards, which were just simply unattainable for me. So there's lots to unpick there in terms of how other people perceive you as being oversensitive or overdramatic, and how that can then show up in your life. Yeah, that was an interesting revelation for me personally to have to deal with, and I still have to sit with it. I mean, even sort of 6+ maybe years on, kids are older now, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before in other podcast episodes, that my eldest daughter, who is almost 13 now as I record this podcast, can remember 2 different mummies. She is consciously can tell me about the 2 different mummies, and the mummy that was more stressed and angry and shouty and reactive, and the mummy that I am now, more often where I am calmer and kinder and have more capacity to be emotionally resilient. And that was a real eye-opener for me when we've had conversations about that. So there is part of like acknowledging the harm that you have caused and why that has happened, and being able to move forward from that as well. So lie number 3, I am bad with people. What is actually happening here potentially is social burnout, difficulty in reading subtext, masking exhaustion. You might have guilt about info dumping, and you might struggle to sort of make friends beyond acquaintance level, or feel wholly safe in social situations. And I have to say, I think I'm probably yet to find, at the age of 40, my quote unquote tribe, if you like, of like people, or even just a person that is close by, that I can be in the company of and not worry about how I'm being perceived, or not worry that I've stuck my foot in it with something, or that I've been overzealous or too moody, or like not having to monitor parts of myself. It's fascinating, actually. Fondly imagined when my kids started school that would be a great opportunity to meet other people and make new friends in the mum friends network. And I had really great experiences with my first daughter of being in the NCT. We were lucky enough to be able to do NCT, and we had a great bunch of people that we did that with. And during those sort of first formative baby years, they were like an invaluable support network in terms of getting through that, the first years of being a new parent with a young person, and everything that you're experiencing with them is a first for the first time. And what does that all mean? And is this normal? And all that fun stuff. And although we're not like, we don't see each other on the regular anymore, when we do get together every so often, like that bond is still there. That's really nice. But apart from that, I've never really made it into any significant like mum groups. And I think partly that was because when my eldest daughter was at primary school, I was working as a teacher. So I was never there to pick up and drop off. She was like a breakfast and after school kid. And any time that my husband was sort of working shifts, he did more of the pickups than I did and the drop-offs. So I wasn't there initially at that sort of community building time when everybody was in the same boat of, you know, their kids going to school for the first time and all that jazz. But there have been sort of big social groups of people that have come out of the year group that my daughter was in that still exist because younger siblings, and you know, they've obviously just formed a bond over the last 8 years or so. And it's fascinating to watch that from the outside with a kind of, I wonder what I could have done differently vibe in my mind, I wonder what it is about those people that makes them so appealing to be with, or you know, how did that happen? How did they get into being friends like that? Like, how do you do that sort of thing? Those are still questions that I ask myself at the age of 40, like how are friendships formed when it's not through like trauma bonding or adversity? Like, how do people get so comfortable in the presence of other people? So I find that a really interesting thing. And I do wonder whether I will ever fully experience that in this lifetime. I'm not convinced that I will, but that is still something that's actually quite raw for me to think about and consider, because I don't really fully understand it. So that is an interesting one. I'm not bad with people. I'm selective, I think, because there's so much to consider in terms of masking and people pleasing and all sorts of different things that you're grappling with at the time that you're having a social interaction. And I'm aware of many contexts where I have been too much for people. I've talked too much about myself, or I've been too negative in contact with people and communications with things. We're all capable of reflecting on a deep level, aren't we, about these things and sort of finding out where the problems might be. And then you try and adjust and you recalibrate yourself and how you present in the world. I would say I'm so far down this journey as I am, I'm still figuring out who I am in a social context, because it very much depends on the social context. I could probably do a whole episode on that as well, but I'll leave that one where it is. I'd be interested to know what your experiences on that are in terms of like how you are with people. Do you consider yourself to be bad with people or struggle with social situations? Do you have a close-knit group of friends? Like, where have they come from? How did that happen for you? I'd be really interested to know more about that because I find it absolutely fascinating. So the next lie is number 4. I am disorganized and chaotic. I embody half of this, or I embody this with half of me, I would say. I can definitely have the potential to be disorganized and chaotic. However, I'm grateful in this moment to have the autistic parts of my brain, which kind of keep a lid on that to a certain extent. Seeing my husband, who is pure ADHD, he has no autistic reins to keep him in check. That is fascinating to watch and live with. I'm sure I am fascinating to watch and live with too. But what's actually happening, and that I regularly remind myself about for him, is that there are ADHD related executive function challenges happening for him. There's lots of sensory clutter happening. There's time blindness, there's decision fatigue, there's like that interest based nervous system. And it's absolutely fascinating to witness that in him. It's not that he's incapable of doing normal domestic things, it just does not interest him in the slightest. And so he has to work really, really hard in order to access the parts of his brain that he needs to do those kinds of things. And that has been so fascinating. I used to say to him, like way before neurodivergence was ever even a spot on the horizon, that our brains are just different in terms of the way that he sees the world and I see the world, and we put things together and how we live domestically. We have lots and lots in common, obviously, because that's why we're married. But in terms of like how we live, I've often thought to myself and said out loud, we just have different brains. Like, we see the world in a very different way. And what's really interesting now is to have the knowledge about that is literally true, and to have the knowledge about how his brain works as a pure ADHD brain and how my brain works as an ADHD brain. and where they're similar and where they're very different. So I feel this disorganized and chaotic, but also there's another part of me that is like so not disorganized and chaotic. And some people would describe me as extremely organized, which is fascinating because I host both of those things in my body. And this next one that I'm going to talk about, there's only a couple more that I'm going to go through here today. Lie number 5, I'm selfish, I'm too much, or I'm not enough. What's actually happening here is that you've had unmet needs, you have people-pleasing patterns, you have been masking to survive. And I touched on this briefly there a little bit ago in talking about friendships. I'm selfish, I'm too much, I'm not enough. I felt all of those things in various different situations. And that is not just down to what's happening inside our brains, but it's down to what we've been taught by society in terms of how we show up and how we present and how we are regarded by the world in terms of how we're presenting in that moment. So if you're having to take some time out, for example, to rest and regenerate and rejuvenate, but there's stuff that still has to happen sort of domestically or in life, you can be considered selfish because you're taking that time when you should be giving it to other people. You might be too much. I can be considered too much if I get really excited about something. I still have a very sort of childlike excitedness in me where I can literally be like flapping about and jumping up and down and like really enthusiastic and excited about something that is exciting and fun for me, that is engaging for me, which is not considered the appropriate response for a 40-year-old woman. My almost teenager finds that incredibly embarrassing nowadays. Just another way that I embarrass her in public. Existing embarrasses her in public. But that can be too much. And when you can talk a lot about things and that can be too much. Or not enough in terms of like not necessarily being able to show up for people in the way that they need you to. In that moment, you can be considered to not be enough. So I'd be interested to see sort of if you have also felt that or experienced that yourself as well. And then the final lie that we have embodied that I want to discuss, there's like a million, but we've only got so long in a podcast episode, is that everyone else finds this easy. What's wrong with me? So what's actually happening here is potentially we've got undiagnosed neurodivergent traits. We've got extreme effort behind the scenes. We're masking fatigue. When I had my assessment for autism and ADHD, I believe, they've all kind of melded into one now. It's definitely autism one because it was a 3-hour appointment video call with this psychiatrist dude who was like very fascinated and seemed to be very fascinating in the answers that I was giving to the questions that he was asking me. And what he managed to unpick during that assessment, which ultimately led to one of the things that led to the diagnosis of quote unquote high functioning autism, it does literally say that on my report and I hate it, was that I have created over the years a number of quite complex and intricate systems in my life, thanks autism, in order to function as a human being and to appear as a functioning human being. And that if any of those systems collapse for one reason or another, my life descends into absolute chaos. So things like healthy eating, for example, it's something that I've struggled with on and off my whole life. If I am too overwhelmed and if I'm burnt out or my system is just overwhelmed with sensory input or fatigue or anything else, it becomes impossible for me to make a decision about healthy food, to make a healthy choice, to cook a healthy meal, to even go to the shop and buy a healthy pre-made thing. It feels like it's impossible for me to do that. I cannot access that. I cannot look after myself in that way. And I would just survive off bags of crisps and chocolate and anything that I could just instantly get my hands on, like some sort of carby stodge. I would just live my life eating that instead because I have not got access to that part of my executive functioning at the time. And that is part of the extreme effort behind the scenes. Is like trying to maintain all of these little systems that mean that, you wash on a regular basis and you present cleanly on a regular basis and all of those things that could quite easily just collapse under the weight of just existing in a world that isn't built for us and does often for some people. And the reason that this kind of why everyone else finds this easy, what's wrong with me, sticks is because you didn't see other people struggling because they weren't masking. Other people just simply don't struggle with keeping themselves clean and feeding themselves regularly and not overeating and not struggling to control addiction of some kind, because they just don't have the impulse. It's not there. They're not constantly having to fight with that all the time, every day. Look, I've seen two examples of one of people who take ADHD medication and it works for them. I've unsuccessfully titrated ADHD medication twice. It's just not going to work for me. But some people who do take the ADHD meds, it's almost instantaneous. If it's going to work for them, it's almost an instantaneous reaction within the first few days of taking the medication. And they have that kind of, oh my God, my brain is so quiet. Is this what it's like for everybody else? No wonder they can focus and get stuff done and be consistent, because they're not constantly firefighting the 25 tabs that are open and the 3 different types of music that are playing and the 2,000 things on the to-do list that are going around their brain in a roundabout all the time like a tornado. And the other thing that I've seen people talk about is people that are having weight loss injections like Mounjaro or Ozempic, who've talked about the fact that the food noise just disappears. So their bodies and brains are not constantly thinking about putting food in their mouths of some description, what's for the next meal, fighting cravings for things. They just have found that when the medication kicks in, they eat a meal and then they're done. They're satisfied. They might not even finish that meal because they've reached the point of fullness. The medication has allowed them to access the sensations in their body where they can go, wait, I'm actually full now. I don't need to keep eating this. And it's like the noise in their brain isn't there anymore, and it's like clarity. You think, oh my God, no wonder some people aren't overweight or aren't struggling with like food related issues, because this is what it's like in a body that doesn't feel like that all the time. Wow, no wonder they think I'm just lazy or I'm just this or I'm just that, because they've got no concept of what it's like to live inside this brain. So no one sees 90% of the effort that goes into looking like you're coping. I mean, I do, because I'm living it with you. And that idea that when you can't put that effort in it, just simply showing up and existing and presenting as a quote unquote stable, normal human being every day, that looks like you're broken and that you're finding things that other people find easy difficult. There's a whole lot of backstory that goes into that in terms of the reasons why some things are challenging. And of course, society and how they treat us is like, got a lot to consider there as well, because we do absorb these kind of statements about ourselves. And I'm here to tell you to stop that shit. Stop it. Stop listening to what other people have got to say about you from that context. Stop giving a shit about what other people think about you. And that is essentially the core message of everything that I do in my work, in my podcast, in my book, in my social media content, in my coaching, in any speaking that I do. It is, you have to think about yourself first. Think about how you consider yourself. How do you speak to yourself? What do you think about yourself? That matters above all else. And other people's external validation is trash. Like, bin that shit off. Not to be on my high horse about it, obviously. And obviously, I know it's not as easy as that, but that is what we're working towards at a foundational level. And that is what is completely, absolutely life-changing. A lot to think about in this episode. And I could talk all day about it. I really could, but I won't keep you much longer because I know you've got things that you need to do with your own life. But yeah, there's lots to consider. And if something, as I said at the start, has sort of resonated with you and you'd be interested in telling me more about it, then please do just ping me an email or send me a message on the socials, and we can sort of empathise about that together, because it's difficult. It's really, really tricky. So if this episode has resonated with you, I want you to know that you're not alone. It's a very common experience for those of us who are neurodivergent, who are women, who are parenting, who are carrying the mental load of a household and a life. Like, it is extremely challenging. We are spinning all the plates and most of them are invisible and other people don't see them. And this is exactly the sort of stuff that, as I said at the start, my book explores. So again, if you've not already signed up to the book waitlist and you're interested in doing so, then you can do that in the link on my website, which will be in the show notes. You can click on it right now while you're listening to this just now. And if burnout is still weighing you down and you haven't already downloaded my free 5 hidden signs of burnout, I've got a little freebie on that as well. And I've actually just created a new freebie, which will be available for you to download imminently once I've got it up on the system. And that is 10 permission slips to give your brain in terms of changing that self-talk and trying to unpick some of those lies that we've internalized about ourselves. It's literally 10 permission slips, 10 statements where you can give yourself permission to rest guilt-free, to show up how you need to. And there's also some, if you're into that kind of thing, some journaling prompts that go along with each of those as well. It's absolutely free. When that is available, you'll find that on my website as well under the freebies section. And if you think there's somebody that it would benefit to hear this episode, then please share it with them. Somebody that might need to hear that actually they were never broken and that they're just unseen, and that who they are and how they show up in the world is just valid, and that, you know, if they need that extra little bit of support to feel seen and to feel validated, then please do share this episode with them, because it might just change something for them for the better. So thank you for spending this time with me in this episode. You are doing better than you think, and you're definitely not too late. No matter how old you are listening to this episode, no matter how late you have discovered your neurodivergence or suspect your neurodivergence, we will be having a summer holiday break, so I will be back with you in September. And until then, take care of your brilliant, sensitive, powerful self. I'll speak to you soon.